Hi there, I'm Professor Juris, and I just wanted to make you a quick video about producing a photographic portfolio. And it could be a portfolio for entering art exhibitions, or it could be a portfolio for turning into a photographic class. And that's one of the main reasons I'm making this video after seeing portfolios turned in. For many years, I've been teaching over 37 years now, and I wanted to make a video just to help students get more continuity into their final portfolio. So that's the purpose of this. So if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, and please make sure you hit the subscribe channel at the end of the video. So what I want to talk about, I think, a little bit about is the continuity of a portfolio, and that's why I have these apples here. And the first thing to think about when producing a portfolio is going to be your exposure. And this is whether it's a portfolio for digital photography or for black and white photography. Your exposure is very important in the camera. Now, you may think that if you're shooting digital, the exposure is not that important because you can, if you're shooting in RAW, you can go in and adjust and stuff. But it really is important that you get the precise exposure on every image, so that every image will line up as far as the color goes, as far as the lightness and darkness goes, your detail in your shadow areas, your detail in your highlight areas. So you want to make sure you have exposure, and that's really important in black and white photography. And in black and white photography, it may seem a little bit harder because you don't get to see the image instantly. On a digital camera, you can look at the image instantly, or pull it up on your computer, which is even better, so you can look at it. But what you want to have with this is you want to have the prints looking all the same as far as contrast goes, as far as the density goes, brightness and darkness. So you don't want to have prints that are looking good and then have a really dark print in the batch. Or a print that's underexposed, and by underexposed, it's going to look kind of gray and muddy, and you can kind of, in digital, you can almost kind of see through the image if it's underexposed greatly. So you want to avoid that. Now, one thing I did want to mention, that when doing black and white like film photography, there's a lot of places, if we're talking about different schools and stuff, there's a lot of schools that don't develop exactly the way we do at Sinclair College. At Sinclair College, one of the things I set up when I set up the developing station was that we're using D76, and we're using it as a mixture, Kodak D76. We're using it as a mixture of 1 and 1, 1 to 1, 1 part water to 1 part D76. And I think a lot of people think that that's done just to save money, but it's actually not done just to save money. What it's done is it produces a negative that's efficient every time. And by what I'm talking about is, like, when you mix D76 1 to 1 and you use it, you're using it that one time and then you're dumping it out. So your developer is going to be consistent every time. I've seen photography programs where they'll put a gallon of D76 out with a funnel, and after a student develops their roll of film, they pour that back into the D76 straight. They'll pour that back into the gallon. And then some places they say write down how many rolls you did and stuff, so they can keep track of how many the gallon does. But as you know, some people forget to write it down and stuff, and you never really know how many rolls of film have gone through a gallon of film. So what happens is that changes the density of the film in both the highlights and the shadow area, depending upon how you agitate. So developing your film is the other, developing your film correctly and precisely, and doing it the same exact way every time is very important in developing consistency or continuity in your negatives. So your negatives will all print the same. If you're exposing correctly and developing correctly, and developing in a way that it's the same every exact time, your negatives, if you go set up to do like a contact print with an 8x10, 4x5 negative, your negatives will all print the same. You can, once you get the tests done and stuff, you'll be able to take the next negative and put it there because your negatives were all exposed correctly, and they were developed correctly. And other things to think about with like developing is make sure you have a good thermometer, and make sure the temperature is always the same that you're doing it. And then your agitations. Your agitations are very important. You can't be daisical when you're doing your agitations. Like I've seen some people, I've watched students develop film by the sink, and they'll pick it up for a time and set it down, and then they'll not even pay attention to the clock and maybe pick it up a little bit later. And I've seen students rolling their tanks and not getting consistent agitation from batch to batch. And that's what you want. If you're not agitating consistently, one of the things that's going to happen is the film's going to be developed differently, so it's not going to print the same. So you're going to have some prints that are very low in contrast and very muddy, and some prints that are very high in contrast. And you don't want that. You want consistency. So if I was looking at these apples, for example, if this was your portfolio, this is a nice red apple. This one has a little bit. This one's more yellow. So if I was like, if these were your prints, this doesn't stay the same as these. So you want the color and like how light and dark they are, to be the same across the board. So when I look at them, they all are the same. I don't say, well, that one's really light or that one's really dark, which I say a lot. Or the contrast is really great in this one and the contrast is not so great in this one. So you want that to stay the same, going across the board. And that, again, comes from two different things. And even in digital, you need to have the exposure right so those prints all look the same. But that comes from, in film photography, that comes from your exposure and development, whereas in digital photography, it comes from exposure. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was your subject matter or your theme. So, if I was going to grab some blueberries and put some blueberries in here too, or something else, because you should have a constant theme when you're developing a portfolio that's going to lend itself to getting an exhibition if you want an exhibition. And the tighter you can make that theme, the better. One of my most successful portfolios, I've had a few, but one of them was called the Stream Bed series. And what I did is I photographed using infrared film a number of models, like sitting or laying, in a stream bed, mostly in Ohio, but I did some like out west and stuff too, but where the water is very cold. But the stream bed series was very aligned with each other. So all the pictures were with infrared film, and they were all kind of the same subject matter. Now they were different models, but they were the same type of thing. So when I put those up, they were just gorgeous, aligned to each other. Another theme I did was the Dark Lodge series, which was a series of portraits, and they were all photographed in a studio I was using at the time. But they were all very consistent in the theme, but there were a number of different people. Now, let's say that you might have a theme, and it would be people with balloons. So even at that, like I'll hear somebody come to me and say they have a theme of people with balloons, holding a thing of balloons. Well, it's important within that theme that you're really cohesive about what you're actually doing. Like it could be a theme of people holding balloons wearing black coats with old buildings in the background, never facing the camera, but maybe facing away from the camera, so they're a little bit more mysterious. And that just goes with making the thing more consistent. I've had students do a theme where they took a doll and put it in all different kind of locations, and they used the same doll, but your theme can also end up being boring. So you want to try to build some type of excitement in your theme, and something that people look about. So the worst critics that you're going to find are going to be your friends, because I don't really do student portfolio or student critiques where you put work up on the board and let the other students in the class talk about it, because you could put the grayest, muddiest prints up on the wall, and when somebody gets up, another classmate gets up there to talk about it, one of the things they'll say is like, "Oh, these are nice." Nobody wants to criticize, their peers' work, but in a sense, in order to learn, you have to criticize it. So, if the prints aren't good, you need to let people know that, so that they understand that this just didn't quite make the full cup of coffee. So you need to stabilize everything so they all blend in together as far as the continuity. And the last thing I really wanted to mention, come up with the uniformity in your portfolio, is your presentation. The presentation is very important. You could have the best prints in the world, but if you trim them with a chainsaw, and don't use a T-square when you mount them on the board, it's just going to be a crappy presentation. And let's say you had really nice images and you sent them digitally to a gallery, and you were awarded a show, and then when you took the prints there, you took them on the mount board and you cut them all out with scissors because you don't have a proper paper cutter, or you don't understand how to use a proper paper cutter, and your prints are crooked and they're not aligned on the board correctly. The gallery's probably going to turn you away and say, yeah, call us back in a few years or something when your presentation is better. So what does it also mean? Like when I do a portfolio, if I'm doing the prints vertically on the board, meaning the portrait alignment. So if I'm shooting them in the portrait format, you want to have the boards on the portrait format, all of them. You don't want to have one that's in the landscape format in the middle of it or something. And you don't want to throw in filler prints. So if you needed 18 images, they should be 18 images that are, very different in a way, but also very cohesive in the portfolio. And what I mean by that statement is that I had students that, for example, just use the same person over and over again in their portfolio. And it's okay that if there's some difference going on, but if it's a portfolio of the person just standing in front of different things, it's boring. You need to have something going on that's going to spark the minds of people and make them think and look at things. Like I was talking about a person with balloons. If you had a person with black balloons, standing in front of old steel mills in Youngstown, Ohio, wearing a black coat or something, and they were looking away, it's kind of mysterious look, especially if there was, flames and smoke. And if you're doing Photoshop, of course, you could always add that up and, bring that out. So I think that's about all I wanted to actually, mention in this video. I wanted to keep it kind of short, but so let's go back over the things. You want your prints to match as far as density goes. You want a nice overall density in the print. You don't want them too light. You don't want them too dark, but you want that same density in print to print. Now, if you don't have the exposure right in one of them and you think it's a great shot, go back and reshoot it. You can't have a print in a portfolio that doesn't match the rest of them. That is very important about presenting a final portfolio. Again, in your presentation, you want the prints to be all trimmed perfectly. You want them to be square. Usually, if I'm putting prints in, they're all the same size too. So if I was doing like 11 by 14 board and I had 4 by 5s on there, excuse me. Whenever I bring the print down from the top of the board, if it's 4 inches, I'll make every one like that. So then every one would be on the board in the same place. And the nice thing about that is too, if you decide to have window mats cut for the print, you can just go have 25 or 50 window mats, whatever you need for your portfolio, cut the same exact way, because your prints are all on the board in the exact same place and your prints are all the exact same size. So it makes it easy. So again, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please hit the subscribe button for me, and we'll see you with the next video. Hope you have a great day. Thank you.